WEFUNK. We funk.
Where, I guess another Big LW Jammin World podcast kind of slant for the number 4 story, as perhaps it's not necessarily going to be setting the world on fire. And it is definitely a New York exclusive. So, if you're one of the legions of Jammin World podcast fans in Iowa, you can go fuck yourselves, or buy a Greyhound ticket, because the number 4 thing that we are looking forward to in the year 2020 on the Jammin' World is the musical month of March in New York City. Where, of course, March always really a fun month, just in general. Weather's starting to break, especially across the country. More warm weather. Cities start holding, festivals, and early spring tours start. The weather is changing, and you are getting closer and closer to outdoor shows in general during March, right? But as well in New York City, however, March associated with some pretty epic traditions, and both of them will be celebrated quite heavily this March, right, in New York City, as well as, I guess, however, there are, just in New York City as well, the month of March, couple other huge, cross-genre pop stories going down, as Celine Dion, as well as Billie Eilish, and Billy Joel, as well as Pearl Jam, all coming to New York City. All right, so 4 major arena acts going down in New York City in March, as well as the Love Rocks New York, and as well as the Brooklyn Comes Alive Festival, which has a pretty sick lineup. O'Teal and Friends, members of Turquoise, doing a Prince tribute, I believe, on the bill. A lot of good shit going down at Brooklyn Comes Alive, which has been condensed down to a one-day affair this year, but pretty sick, one-day music festival going down in Brooklyn in March for the Brooklyn Comes Alive. But I guess as well, another big moment for March, as well as March, just as well as we all remember from last year, but when I debuted the Big LW Jammin' World podcast playlists, all right, March packed with playlists right here on the podcast, all right, as expected. Another St. Patrick's Day playlist, as well as another Notorious D.A.Y. playlist, all right, and this year with the special Hall of Fame kind of feel, as when we all pause to celebrate our Notorious D.A.Y. this March 9th of 2020, we will all be recognizing a man on his way to the Hall of Fame. Right. Of course, Biggie Smalls elected to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Induction going down over the summer. However, we will celebrate on the Notorious D.A.Y. in March with the Hall of Fame playlist. Right. So all of that to look forward to in the month of March, as well, of course, as a couple of the real annual headlining celebrations that New York has become somewhat synonymous with, especially in the Jammin' World scene, just in general, as really at this point, the 2 true, absolute certified granddaddies of the jam scene, both with rather special celebratory feels going on in New York City in March, pretty much every year at this point, especially now with the annual tradition that has become the Phil Lesh birthday celebrations at the Capitol Theater, where we get some Grateful Dead celebration, where Phil Lesh has hosted birthday shows at the Cap. I want to say the last, 10 years almost, it seems, but definitely as Phil Lesh has gotten older and toured less, he is focused more on the Capitol Theater. I guess over the last couple of years, he's kind of focused back on some more, cross-country touring. However, in New York, Phil pretty much exclusively plays at the Cap, right, which has really become, of course, the longtime home of the Grateful Dead, dating back to the early 70s. But now, 50 years later, Phil Lesh still a home in Portchester at the Capitol Theater, all right, with, like I said, just the annual tradition of the Capitol Theater Phil Lesh birthday shows, all right. However, this year, taking on a very, very special feel as Phil turns lucky number 80. Right, which is just truly just an amazing, an amazingly round number to celebrate anyway. But just an amazing, accomplishment to make it 80 years for anybody. But 80 years when 60 of them you've spent as a certified rock legend is just a absolutely ridiculous run and beyond worthy of celebration for the great Phil Lesh. And it will go down in Portchester over Phil's birthday weekend, with the 15th being on the Sunday. So a very appropriate Friday, Saturday birthday on the Sunday weekend worth of shows, which have been dubbed as the Phil Lesh surprise birthday party, all right? No surprise that the shows are going down, however. No formal announcements on the Friends until the curtain drops. So, Phil, of course, over the last couple of years, kind of plays in the Phil and Friends format with the rotating group of, collaborative guests that join in to help Phil cover the Grateful Dead and, other classic rock catalog. But I guess, and over the last couple of years, he has focused a little bit more playing with the Terrapin Family Band, with Graham Lesh, his son, and the boys, who have went on pretty regular touring with Phil, which is a departure from his career over the last 10 to 15 years anyway. But you would expect members of the Terrapin Family Band on hand. However, you would imagine some pretty special guests, as well as you would expect Peter Shapiro to pull out all the stops for this big 80th birthday celebration, which was, I guess, dating back to last year, rumored to be taking place at Madison Square Garden, where Shapiro was apparently rumored to be trying to get Madison Square Garden and produce an epic Phil and Friends show. I guess the Garden is going to be holding a pretty epic celebration show in March that we'll get into in a minute, with, I would imagine, some members going with I would imagine some members visiting Portchester a couple of days later and helping out to celebrate Phil's birthday. But I will get to that story, I guess, in a minute. But the show's not going down in Madison Square Garden as well. I guess there is another Phil Lesh birthday celebration taking place over the summer at Lock-In Festival, which is, of course, Shapiro's festival down there in Virginia. So there will be an official Phil birthday celebration at Lock-In. However, the official birthday weekend shows going down at the Cap for Phil. In terms of the surprise guests, all right, a couple of names we can scratch off the list, as upon further review upon further review of some scheduled tours, All right, but very unfortunately, of course, the first one you check is Bob Weir, Dead & Co. However, Dead & Co. not on tour, all right, in March. However, Bob Weir and Wolf Brothers, okay, on tour in Nebraska on Phil's birthday, all right, so we can scratch a Bob Weir potential sit-in off the list, as well as the boys from J-Rad, as well in the Midwest for that birthday weekend. So no boys from J-Rad, however, some potential guests, right, with Widespread Panic, with no big scheduled tour, Phil's former mate in the Q, Jimmy Herring, potentially available, as well as a couple of guys that we can confirm will be in New York City week of the show. But another member of the Q and Phil and friend fave, but Warren Haynes will be around New York City with no scheduled bookings the weekend of Phil's birthday. All right, as well. Chris Robinson, the aforementioned, but before the Crows summer tour, Chris Robinson, who will be part of the New York City the Love Rocks New York City event at Carnegie Hall, will be taking place the Thursday night before the Friday, Saturday, Sunday run, so expect Chris Robinson as a friend on Friday night of Phil's birthday week, all right? As well, of course, we can always hold out hope for any of the assorted members of Phish who will not be on tour, Trey Anastasio Band or other. No members of Phish have scheduled shows going down. That would really be Shapiro pulling out all the stops and giving Trey's, of course, relation with Shapiro, but, relation with Phil as well, of course, but, proximity to the Cap and familiarity with the venue and whatnot. You would not be at all surprised to see a Trey sit-in or any various members of Phish, because you really got to expect some big names and some real special sit-ins to make the surprise birthday party one worthy of an 80-year celebration. I guess a couple more names, but Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi as well, perhaps. In New York City week of show with no TT bookings going down following weekend. So put Derek and Susan on the list of potential friends to attend the birthday celebration of Phil Lesh, the very, very fun surprise birthday party shows where we will not find out who's sitting in until the curtain drops. So a very, very fun weekend run of, a very, very fun birthday run of shows for Phil Lesh on a very, very special 80th birthday celebration. So definitely looking forward to that March 13th, 14th, and 15th at the Capitol Theater. Right. However, another very, very special celebration going down. And like I mentioned just a couple of nights earlier, with a couple of names you can expect to see perhaps over the weekend. And like I mentioned, at a venue that was rumored to hold the Phil Lesh 80th birthday party, but Madison Square Garden, of course, like I mentioned, rumored to hold the Phil and Friends 80th birthday party last year. However, Madison Square Garden hosting another celebration of an annual March Rite of Passage in New York City. But, of course, I speak of the famed Allman Brothers March residency, where for over 20 years the Allman Brothers came and played 10 shows, at the very least 10 shows, oftentimes featuring guests anywhere from Phil Lesh and Bob Weir to Eric Clapton and Lee Von Helms, as well as Trey and Page, and that was all just in 2009. Right, and of course, throughout the 2-decade-plus residency, all sorts of great guests and amazing moments, and truly one of the, like I said, most celebrated, synonymous band residency in New York City, perhaps the Allman Brothers at the Beacon every March. Right, and an epic celebration of the Allman Brothers March residency at the Beacon, going down at the Beacon's older brother in a lot of ways, as Madison Square Garden, of course, the parent company that owns the Beacon Theater, which hosted all those great Allman Brothers shows, as well as over 200 Tedeschi Trucks Band shows, with Derek and Susan having their own plaque in the back of the Beacon, with over 100,000 tickets sold at the venue for Tedeschi Trucks Band. You would imagine that it would make logical sense to hold this celebration of the Allman Brothers at the Beacon, of course, the place of the last Allman Brothers show in 2015. But we are going to the big room, downtown, to the world's most famous arena, and Madison Square Garden will host its first ever Allman Brothers show of sort, where in all of those years of the Allman Brothers famed New York City residency, at, playing, instead of 1 or 2 shows at the Garden, playing 15 shows at the smaller Madison Square Garden owned Beacon Theater. So a very, very fun chance to celebrate the Allman Brothers in an arena, and of course the world's most famous one, at least by their claim anyway, but a really, really fun, special kind of night, and a place and time to celebrate the Allman Brothers, of course, with, the last living members of the Allman Brothers. Right. But, of course, since the Allman Brothers played their last show at the Beacon in 2015, both Butch Trucks and Greg Allman passed away. All right, so we have original members, J-Mo, as well as Mark Quiones, all right, longtime member. They will be holding down percussions for what really became the late-era Allman Brother kind of core group of Derek and Warren on guitar, with O'Teal on bass, all right, joined by Chuck Leavell on keys as well, so long time, of course, made famous by the epic piano solos in Jessica, and all of the great, after Dwayne's death, and that first, head of the Brothers and Sisters album for the Allman Brothers, but just amazing piano and keyboard work for Chuck Leavell, who's, of course, been touring with little band named the Rolling Stones. But Chuck Leavell on the bill to help out with keys, joining Derek and Warren and O'Teal to celebrate the tradition and history of the Allman Brothers in New York City for a march, not a run, but a night. And definitely super excited. That is on March 10th, on a Tuesday. All right, ahead of the Phil birthday week, mind you, like I said. So if you want to add up any dots, all right, you're going to have O'Teal, who's currently, of course, the bassist of Dead & Co., although the bassist, like I said, so you can't really have O'Teal featured too heavily on a Phil and Friend show. But, of course, next to O'Teal, though, you are, of course, going to have Warren Lauren, longtime Phil collaborator, as well as Derek, who Derek and Susan did the Phil sit-ins with Lock-In a couple years ago as well, so no strangers there. They will both be in New York as well. That show you would imagine to have a lot of special guests on hand to celebrate the Allman Brothers as well. Right, apparently Dickie Betts did turn down an invitation, but maybe perhaps a Dickie Betts sit-in. If not a Dickie Betts sit-in, perhaps a Dwayne Betts sit-in, where, of course, there is the Allman Betts Band project going out as well, the Devin Allman, Dwayne Betts, as well as, I believe, Barry Oakley Jr. We have 3 members of Disciples of Living Allman Brothers carrying on the legacy there. All right. So you'd expect, I would expect some members of the Allman Betts Band to be in attendance, as well as, of course, Robert Randolph, guys like that, the Jimmy Vivinos, and frequent guests of the Allman Brothers, as well as guys like Jimmy Herron as well. Dwayne Trucks from Widespread Panic will as well be helping out on that show, so you would expect maybe Jimmy Herring, another Widespread Panic member, and of course, long time, he was actually played with the Allman Brothers very briefly, and a long time, Allman Brother sit-in collaborator. You'd expect Jimmy Herring to perhaps make a guest spot down there for the Allman Brothers celebration at Madison Square Garden, March of 2020. And March of 2020 in New York City, the number 4 thing that the Jammin' World podcast is looking forward to in the year 2020, the week in March, where really, I guess, kicked off by the notorious DAY on March 9th, where we all honor the life and legacy of Biggie Smalls here on the Jammin' World podcast. All right, the next night, we go epic celebration of the Allman Brothers March history in New York City. All right. And then closing the weekend down with 3 shows in honor of the 80th birthday of Phil Lesh, with the cake ceremony going down on the Sunday, Phil's actual birthday. So a pretty special week in New York City from the 9th to the 15th. And as well, like I said, sandwiched between Celine Dion and Pearl Jam. Right? So epic month of music in New York City. And the number 4 moment on the Jammin' World podcast, things to look forward to in 2020 list.
Big F! WEFUNK. We funk.